I'll start talking a little bit while Woody's setting up here. Again, we apologize. We had some confusion on the time here. We thought we weren't going on until 1. Artificial intelligence and judicial decision-making. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the background, if you will, of AI and a couple of products that are out there. My name is Tom O'Connor. I work with a company called CourtLink up the road in Seattle. We actually provide an interface that allows courts around the country to provide electronic public access to the public. So people are tapping in through an interface that we provide to check court records and docket information. Many of you may be familiar with the PACER system, which the federal courts have had available for a while, which is a court-by-court system. There's one interface that you can go to, but you still have to dial to each court one at a time to check their records. We provide a Windows front end to that. And in the last couple of years, 18 months or so, there's been a real explosion of electronic public access at the state level, either statewide in states that have uniform systems or county level in states that don't have uniform systems. But in both cases, there's a need for how to search through a tremendous amount of material. And that's really at its most basic level, I think, the artificial intelligence that we've used for a long time has really been indexing. I think if you look at Lexis and Westlaw, in its simplest phrases, you're talking about indexing huge amounts of textual material and then doing simple word searches or progressively Boolean searches through those, saving those searches and combining them somehow into a stored database as a rudimentary type of artificial intelligence. And at the same time, in the software market, there were some of what are called decision tree software packages that came up. And these were really just the old decision tree type of things. There's one called Triage, which has been around for a little bit, which does basically decision analysis, but really was very rudimentary in the sense that you had to tap or type in a huge amount of data yourself and set up these parameters for what it was you were looking for, and then supposedly this program would go in and try to make some decisions for you based on the parameters you set up. Most people found that it was easier to do that on a yellow pad than it was to try to use the computer, because really all you were doing was typing on the computer what you would be writing on the yellow pad. The retrieval was pretty easy after you come to those decisions, but you could also do it on a yellow pad, type in your answers to the computer, retrieve it from the computer. Not particularly sophisticated. And then more recently, a program called CaseMap has become pretty widely spread. CaseMap is also a decision analysis type software, but it's taken it a little step further by linking to existing databases. So if you have a database, whether it's in Lexis or West or ASCII files or in the litigation support field, things like summation or gravity.
Do you want to move over to the field of vision and you'll see live broadcasting?
Oh, live to where?
To everybody on the internet.
Oh, everybody on the internet.
Who wants to watch.
Yeah, everybody on the internet finds this interesting, which is probably everybody in this room. Oh, I mean, this is being recorded, too. Oh, I got to be really careful, huh?
And I got my name up now.
CaseMap, I think, though, has taken this whole decision analysis process one step further by linking to existing databases. So you can take some query language, try to set out some parameters, and it'll basically go and start looking for things in your databases. And, you know, some of the sort of simplistic type of intelligence analysis, if you're looking for something about the New York Yankees and you set up a set of rules that you want to find something that has George and Steinbrenner within one paragraph of each other and then New York within 2 paragraphs of that. It'll go searching through your databases and try to find that and then return some hits to you. I think a more sophisticated product that's been around for a while, although not really advertised a whole lot, and maybe that's been one of its problems, is what was originally called Prologue, which was a Borland product. Anybody ever hear of it? That's not too surprising, because that's been one of their problems. Prologue was marketed by Borland. I think it was some Swedish guys, some Scandinavian guys from, I forget exactly where, had developed the product. It was basically a programming in some logical query languages. And, I don't know, 8 years old, 7 years old. It's been around for a while in its first incarnation. Borland actually let it lapse. They kind of dropped it and let it revert back to the original developers who are marketing it and have been marketing it now under the name of Visual Prologue. one of the real problems was that it was such a memory-intensive program that 6-7 years ago was just prohibitively expensive for anybody to try to run it in a PC network. Now, of course, as the hardware environment has changed so dramatically, it's much more realistic to beef up a server with the amount of memory it would require. The idea really is to put up a set of rules with certain predicates. And if your query meets the predicates that you set up in these rules, then you have what they call an answer. And the rule then becomes the answer. The rules are kept in the database. Your answers to your queries are kept in a separate database, so that you're searching through these rules, and you don't have to keep all of the textual material for searching over and over and over again. I mean, that's kind of a simplistic way of describing it. But the program would search then through each of these rules that you would set up through prior hits. Now, again, the setting of the predicates, the rule-making process is the key, but it just did it very much faster in a much more organized manner. It just required a ton of memory to run, but a pretty good program. There's an attorney who's also a consultant down in Louisiana, in Metairie, which is a small town outside of New Orleans. His name is Tom Sturwalt, and his email is hannibal@ssstar.com. It's HANNIBAL @SSTAR.com. And he's done a lot of work in this area. It's kind of I shouldn't say it's a hobby for him, because he does do consulting, but he's become a bit of an expert in this area. If anybody is ever looking for some real nuts and bolts on how some of these programs work, Tom is a real good resource. And then I think most recently, the one that we were talking about when we weren't here, is something that just was shown at the ABA Tech Show back in March in Chicago. Anybody familiar with the Lexis Enterprise Knowledge Services? Anybody seen that demonstrated at all? Lexis has come up with something similar to this visual prologue within their database system. The idea is to automatically assign some terms based on an analysis of the language that's in some existing briefs that you might have, or some textual material that you might have. So you set up core terms that you're looking for, and it's going to go searching through its own databases. It's going to search through the Lexis databases. The nice thing about it is, in addition to searching through all the Lexis databases, that it'll let you set up some very, very sophisticated, very intricate terms to be searching for. And apparently that's the power of the program, is it will allow you to become quite precise in what it is you're looking for. Perhaps, and I'm not sure what the technical background is, but building on the natural language type queries that they use in some of their other products. Interesting. I mean, it's interesting that nobody's heard of it. They displayed the thing. I was incredibly impressed with the way it looked, and there was an article on it in the June 1999 ABA Journal on page 76. I can't find anything about it on their website. Nobody who was here in the Lexis booth knew about it. The one person who was referenced, who actually was talking about it at the ABA show, also was Ron Stout, who I'm sure many of you know. Is Ron here? Does anybody know if Ron's? Okay, you might be able to shoot him an email, which I'm going to do also. I was hoping I'd see him here to get some more background on this. But I think what you're seeing, though, and this is a good indication, is that people are using existing databases, whether it's something like CaseMap, setting up its own query language, and linking to databases that are already in existence, or people like Lexis allowing you to query their databases using a document or a query language that you've set up, and try to search for the things that you're looking for in a much more sophisticated manner than simple word searching. Whether we can really call that artificial intelligence or not, I don't know. I think that's a little bit open to question. That's what I want to let Woody talk about, which is how we're making those decisions about what it is we're looking for and what sort of concepts are going into that search technology. Or maybe even more specific, what sort of concept should be going into that. So why don't I turn it over to Woody.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. This mic is not on, or is it on? Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. And I'm okay over here, right? For the camera.
Yeah.
You may have heard I've got to stand over. Can I stand over here? Because I can't get it up on my computer and the screen at the same time. Want me to run that?
No, you're fine.
You're on? Can I do it from here?
Yeah.
Okay. I've tried to break out what I'm going to talk about into three different components that I think we have to deal with. Information is one thing, knowledge is another, and wisdom is the very rare quality that I think we don't often do as well as we should. The fact of the matter is, and this is one of my favorite quotes, in the night all cats are gray. Without knowledge, all information is the same. It is knowledge that adds color to information. And much of what we talk about when we talk about information technology is simply the manipulation of information with databases, with the web, all other kinds of electronic sources that are available to us. Now, I come to this from the point of view of a litigator. I have been involved in a couple of cases over the last few years in which databases, document databases, comprised of millions of documents have been created. And it's my belief that the reason that they get created particularly by defendants, is that the oversupply of information prevents anyone from finding anything of real value. If you go into a place where 1 million documents have been stored and indexed by bait stamp number, for example, which is the common way of doing it, you can't find a thing. It's blind luck if you happen to get something that is useful to you. We've got to learn how to organize information, and that's a lot of the products that Tom has talked about do exactly that. But they only do that. More importantly, we've got to learn how to use that information with knowledge. Now, interestingly, it seems to me, lawyers are very much at the core of that. We have always been involved in the administration of knowledge, so to speak. We know certain kinds of processes are typical to our business. We know we have to get the information. It used to be case law, but now it's coming from everywhere. We know we have to organize that. And most importantly, if we're preparing for trial or preparing an appeal, we've got to have some kind of way of accessing the information that we have. We have to be able to use it effectively. We have to understand it. And the critical thing is the understanding that we must apply our wisdom and experience to the information that we have extracted. And that's what I call knowledge. Knowledge management is a very in word right now. And it's used to cover a lot of different things. Artificial intelligence is only one piece of it. I have a lot of interest in artificial intelligence. Bill Boyd is one of the world's leading experts, I believe, in that. He and I tried to do over the years, do some things together to develop AI protocols for use in litigation. But what I want to talk about today is not that. I'm going to give you a couple of hints. This is hard to do differently than I normally do it. The process today that we have to deal with has become very nonlinear. Everything that we've learned over the last 25 years of lawyering, I believe, has essentially been a linear process, and we're breaking out of that, and that imposes enormous challenges. The Socratic method that we have all grown up with as teachers, I think, is maybe still valuable in the first year, but beyond that, I think it has very little value. We have a legal system that has to adapt to a time when people like my kids are able to sit and watch 7 TV programs all at the same time and flip around through them with the TV clicker. And most amazing to me, understand all 7 of those programs all at the same time. That's a mindset that I don't have and one that I can't develop. Chaos theory has enormous application here. And the kids are at the core of it. They're going to be our students soon, and very quickly they will be in charge of the legal system. We should study chaos theory because it is the law. The law is a wonderful example of chaos theory. We always understood that. We always thought as lawyers, when we found that key case that we came on by accident, that the serendipitous discovery was probably something that came from deep within our intellects and our souls, truth of the matter is, it was probably just serendipitous. It was probably not anything that we did, just where we were when some piece of information popped out at us. But there are ways now with machines to take all of that information and start to control it, and start to control the flow of it, and to extract from it not just information organization, but knowledge. We start with information, and in the 21st century, the randomness of information will drive all kinds of new ways of accessing knowledge and ultimately providing a basis for wisdom. Right now, and I think what Tom was talking about to a large extent, is the process that we're caught up in. We're just simply, to use the vernacular, herding cats. And those cats are all gray. I mean, it's just impossible to keep up with the tremendous increases in information that confront us. The goal has got to be to bring color to that, because we know not all cats really are gray. Cats come in a whole bunch of different colors and sizes. And that is the distinction that we have to find a way to be able to do. Now, where do we start with that and how do we get there? I can't offer you any kind of a clear path, but I can say that the process is pretty easily described. We collect the data, we develop information from that data, we create knowledge by seeing the relationships between various sectors in the thing that we have created. And then we apply our wisdom. That is to say that the experienced trial lawyer, experienced appellate lawyer, experienced professor is able to look at the knowledge that has been collected and created and apply to it insights, intelligences that would not come from the information itself. We add little tags to it. And the goal of modern information technology management is to be able to control those tags, to control the wisdom, and to make it accessible so that when you need to get to it, you can. Traditionally, we do full text searching. That's the Westlaw method that we've all loved and learned a lot about. And you can develop a tremendous amount of data and information doing that. But you now only have a set of information. You've got to add, in order to add wisdom, you have to signify what its importance is, what its relevance is to the task at hand, and from a trial lawyer standpoint, the persuasiveness of it in terms of your goal. We use wetware to accomplish that. That's our brain, that's our soul, that's our instinct. The core question is going to be, how can the machine help me do that? Knowledge management's the buzzword, but it's only a label for the process of trying to use machines to accomplish that sort of thing. Here's one diagram that I pulled off of the internet. This is a distributed information management system. If you can look at that and it makes sense to you, you're probably in the wrong business. You should be in the core IT stuff. I don't have any idea what the heck that means. In the not distant future, machines are going to be able to overcome that kind of a pattern and use wetware to find creative connections. Let me give you 3 books to take a look at that are based upon the idea that Moore's Law, which applies to computer chips, in fact applies to a great deal more than that. Desktop computers in a very short period of time, as a matter of fact, we may almost be there, are going to be almost as smart as people in regard to many of the things that we do. But there's an ultimate limit to the integrated chip itself. There's only so much that we can expect it will do. And there are changes in the offing. I have a nephew that works at Intel. They're doing experiments with using biologic processes to replicate the way in which the human mind approaches information. He's a very, very deeply religious guy, and I thought when he first started telling me about this that he would find it somehow offensive that the company that he worked for was developing this human-like capability in a chip. And I said, Scotty, don't you have trouble with that? And he said, no, I don't have any trouble with that at all. Because what's going to happen is if we're able to develop that, that will free the human spirit to do many, many things that we don't have time to do now, or we don't have a basis for doing. So he has a very positive point of view, and I take it that he knows a lot more about a lot of things than I do, and so I accept that. This is going to happen, whether we like it or not, just because the incredibly increasing power of computers just is inexorable. It's not going to stop. These books talk about it. Robot. I think there were materials that were distributed that had all these sites, but I'm just going to go through them quickly. They're all in the New York Times database if you want to go look at them. When Machines Start to Think, which is an interesting book, but the best one is this one, The Age of Spiritual Machines. Ray Kurzweil, you can get it at Amazon, and it actually is on tape as well as in book form. So if you like to have books on tape, this is one that you can use that is pretty effective. Kurzweil is the guy, as you probably know, who first started to develop voice recognition technology. And he's a tremendously talented, brilliant guy. And this is his view of how we are going to transition into the age when computers are smarter than we are, the age of how. Our goal as teachers in this environment has got to be to integrate that reality into the educational process. We can't be ostrich-like and just ignore it. It's here. How can we do that? I think that means that particularly for young people, this is a very, very exciting time to be a teacher because you're going to write on a clean tablet. The old ways are just changing tremendously, with tremendous rapidity. I'm just going to tell you what we're doing at the University of Arizona, and it's going to be very pedestrian compared to the kinds of things that will come about in the next 5 years, I think. We have a project. We have two projects. One of them is the Courtroom of the Future project, which I'm not going to talk about today, but the newest one, which just came online this spring, is the Law Office of the Future. And our goal is to train lawyers to use information technology in the law office. You can't get to the age of spiritual machines until you get the basics. You have to understand what your problems are in terms of information management before you can start to think about the solution. That's what we have to do as teachers, is to get them through this process. Now, I suspect in a few years the things that I'm going to show you that we do will just be so ordinary that no one will care to do them. People will come to law school and they'll already have these skills. I already see an increasing percentage of the students that are way, way beyond where I am in terms of their knowledge of the basic electronic tools that we now need to run the profession. But I'm just going to run through these very quickly. This is the outline for our project, and you'll see that we have a goal of having a resource center for bar members. I have a radical view for an academic. I think it's a very good idea to have real practicing lawyers in the law school for the students to learn from, and part of the resource center is to attract them to come when they're in Tucson to have a place where they can hook their computers up and do whatever it is that they have to do online. We want to train students and practitioners, and ideally I would like to do that in a combined environment. We're going to try this fall to have a seminar in connection with the State Bar in which students who are preparing papers on a course that I have based on the internet right now on Y2K problems, we're going to have a presentation to the bar by the students with bar involvement. We want to do continuing legal education as well as law student training, and most importantly, because I think there are a whole new set of issues relating to professionalism that come out of the use of technology and the law, is to train people in professionalism, technology, and the ethical considerations that they have to confront. We someday will have a demonstration law office. We are now deeply involved in testing and development of new technologies. We're trying to understand the systematic interface between science, technology, and the law. That's a pretty grand goal. Here's how we do it basically. Everybody in my classes now has to be able to send and receive email documents and files from anywhere using dial-up or a direct connection to the internet. That's just required. Secondly, they have to do that using a specific set of software. I've given up on the idea that everybody can come in and do their own thing. If I can train them to use Exchange Server and Outlook 98, that's good enough. And if they want to then go do Netscape or whatever else it may be, that's up to them. But in order to make the class function, they have to act as if they're operating in a firm, a big F firm, environment in which there is specific software that they have to learn how to use. So by being able to do all of these things that are listed, they will be able to replicate the kind of experience that they're going to have in a high-tech law firm. And in fact, excuse me, I think that describes the basic email information sharing technologies that most law firms will have in the very near future. Interactive video skills just will be at the core of what lawyers do in the future. That's going to be done in meetings. It's going to be interactive depositions from remote places. It's going to be interactive interrogation of a witness in the trial courtroom. Bill and I last year did an experiment in which we did a cross-examination of an expert witness using interactive video. I was over across campus with the expert, and Bill was with our students back in the law school, and we did this extensive interview, exactly as would occur in a trial courtroom. Interestingly, our students all thought, I think probably to a person, that this was a better way of doing it than if they had had that fella live on the witness stand in our trial courtroom. And I think Bill and I both thought that too. He's got some very funny stories. I'm not going to tell you all the stories about the things that the kids did when they ran this process, but the fact is it really worked. The appellate practice is a whole nother dimension. Bill and I did some work for the federal government a year or so ago, and he had the duty of taking care of the lawyers who had used interactive video in the appellate context. And I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Bill, that they all really thought it was effective. And one guy even said, you know, it's the only time I've ever been able to see the judge's eyes in the Second Circuit. Apparently the fully square courthouse, the bench is extremely high and it's dark and you know, you couldn't communicate with the judge. They thought that the interactive video from a remote site allowed them to do that. So these are going to be core skills that people have to have. Tom and I were talking out in the lobby just as we came in here. Part of the reason we were late, I guess. The idea of a firm internet and the ability to participate in that. I have been doing Microsoft 2000 in its beta version for about 6 months. Office 2000, not Windows 2000. Office 2000. It's now out in its final code and available on machines from Dell and Compaq, so on and so forth. But the thing that is remarkable about it is that it allows anybody in the office with any kind of a document with the most modest kinds of computer skills to participate in an office intranet and to post information to the intranet simply by clicking and saving. I mean, it's so easy now to do that I think it will drive an explosion of intranet interest among law firms. Multimedia documents and trial preparation materials, the idea of everything being based on a browser with clickable links to the core information is an idea that's just very exciting to judges and lawyers. I spend a good part of my time talking to judges and lawyers about these sorts of things. And I gave a talk a few months ago to the federal judges in Arizona, and I did a demonstration of a CD-ROM brief in which the access to the record and various other documents as well as the case law that was applicable were all on a CD-ROM, viewed through a browser, Netscape or IE, and with clickable links to each piece that was necessary to make that brief effective. The judges thought that was wonderful. One of them said, boy, you know, now I can go on vacation and I can take the whole case with me on a CD-ROM and work on it, and now I have to schlep along case after case of files and documents and briefs. Here I have it, all I've got to do is take my computer and I have it on a CD. I think that students now getting out of law school have to understand how easy it is to create these things in both WordPerfect and Word. Now the creation of a hyperlink is just a very simple thing. And we ought to expect them to do that and to think of it. It's interesting when you do it that the way you organize the knowledge when you're going to provide the reader with the direct access to it is different than the way you would do it if you're just trying to make an impression by having a huge amount of information in the record. Document assembly and management programs. This is apparently the core of this new Lexis program that we don't know much about. I saw Ron Stout in Chicago and we talked about it a little bit. I did not go to his presentation. But I think that the idea of having every document in the office accessible on a server by people who have appropriate permissions and doing the kinds of things that apparently this new Lexis program allow you to do, which is the sample that was given in the story that Tom made reference to in the ABA journal, was you send in an appellate brief into the system, and the system then starts to categorize various things in the appellate brief and to suggest to you places that you might want to go and look for further information in regard to the argument that you're making. And the people who have used it have found it to be very useful. But in any event, it all starts with a good, effective document management program. And there are several of them now that are becoming available. Eastman Software has developed a program that runs on top of Exchange Server 5.5, which is really good. And I don't know what just happened to my computer. There we go. This is the key: time organization and management. How do you live a life when you are so connected that there's no place that you go that you're out of touch with your office? My wife and I were just talking last night about what this little devil does in terms of making us absolutely connected. And she had not ever used the cell phone as a way of connecting back to her job. She's an elementary school principal. And she said, boy, this is amazing. I mean, I can call in and I can do all this stuff and I can talk to the kids. And I said, yeah, it is, but it gets away from you. All of a sudden, you're always online. You're always available. And that interferes with the way you live your life as a human being. So I don't have a solution to that, but I can identify the problem. And I like to talk to students about it. Lawyers are people who tend to overwork a lot, to be at the office, to work 80-hour weeks, and indeed the structure of the big firm thing is such that young lawyers are expected to bill 50, 60 hours a week. We know that's almost impossible. Our Chief Justice in Arizona says you can't bill 60 hours a week unless you cheat. But the fact of the matter is there are very, very high expectations, 2,400, 2,500 hours a year. It totally destroys a family, unless technology allows you to do both at the same time. And if we can start to talk about that in the law school, so the kids go out into the practice with some sense that they need to be aware of that and understand when their personal lives are slipping away, I think we may do them the biggest service of all. Finally, the internet. I created this slide probably 6 or 8 months ago. I had no idea of the changes that are occurring and would occur in the course of that time period. Not the least of which is a pure technological change. And that is the availability now to most of us, and in a short period of time to all of us, of what the people in the trade call big pipes. That is the ability to be, in your office at least, online all of the time with high-speed information transfers so that you get, I don't know how this is going out over the internet, but I'm sure that if everybody has a fast connection, it will go very well. If people are trying to access this on a 28K modem, it's not going to be very good. Pretty soon we will all have T1 level connectivity almost everywhere. I've had what's called a DSL line, a digital subscriber line, for about a year now. And it's totally changed the way I use the internet because it's online all the time. I don't have to go, start up the modem and listen to the handshake and wait in what now seems, when I'm traveling, an interminable period of time before I get on the internet. And when my email loads up, it just, 50 messages just come across in about a minute. Very, very, very fast. One change that I've noticed that's really significant is that I now use the internet far more than I ever did before. Sometimes for just mundane tasks like a phone book. US West, which is our baby bell where we are, has a phone book called US West DEX, D-E-X, www.uswestdex.com. Anybody can go to it. The phone book works all over the United States. It's very fast and very easy, and it's free, and it's much easier for me to go look up a phone number that I don't know using the US West DEX service than it is to pick up a phone book. And that's because the computer's online all the time. My wife sometimes has trouble sleeping. She'll get up at 2 or 3 o'clock and go out into my office, which is attached to my house, and do some of her schoolwork on the internet. She has a lot of internet resources that she has to access. So I think when that's ubiquitous, when everybody has that kind of access, that the use of the internet as a core, not just for research and other kinds of information searching and collecting, but for communication purposes, is going to change the way we live our lives in a real dramatic kind of way. That means, therefore, that we're going to have to develop some core competencies, and the sense of this slide is that I mean high level. I don't mean high level, I mean fundamental. I probably ought to have a different word, because the modern software now allows you to do it so easily that you don't really need to know HTML unless you have a problem. But they ought to understand that underlying what they see on the screen is HTML stuff, and they ought to be able to go in and look at it and understand at least the basics of it. Because that's going to be the world that they live in for everything. Tom could talk, and we were talking earlier this morning, about what CourtLink is doing in terms of web-based access to court dockets all around the country. And I believe firmly, and one of the big things we talked about at the ABA Tech Show this year is the use of remote filing, and how that's being driven not only by the big pipes that are now available, but by the development of a new technology called XML, which is much more user-friendly and provides a great deal more access to information within the structure of the document. We need to do all of these things in various contexts, in the terms of presentations, in the terms of briefs, in terms of just how we manage stuff in our office, and students need to learn how to do that. They are then building the core skills of professionalism. They're going to learn to do searching. They're going to learn to develop the information that Tom was talking about. They're going to learn the distinction between information management and knowledge management, and the tools for development of knowledge from information, and understanding very clearly that there is a distinction, that information is not knowledge. Information is the basis of knowledge, and knowledge is the basis of wisdom. Fact of the matter is, still in the night, all cats are gray. But in the morning, there's a tremendous variety of color. Once we have introduced knowledge and wisdom into our processes, it's just terrific. Now, unfortunately, because I don't have a thing here, I can't let you name that song, but I have built into, see if you're all very quiet, you can hear this.
I can see it clearly now.
And the author is?
Jose Feliciano.
Billy Preston. No. Johnny Nash. I can see clearly now. Thanks for coming.
I'd like to just make a couple of quick comments at the end, if I could, to emphasize something that I think Woody talks about, which is the difference between information and knowledge. And the key in I think, working with law students. To me, with a background in litigation support, I always like the phrase artificial intelligence because I think the key word in artificial intelligence is artificial. The example I use, my one commercial plug is I've written a book for lawyers called The Automated Law Firm, which is also available on Amazon. And in it we talk about the fact that computers are fast and they process information fast, but fast isn't smart. The difference between processing lots of information quickly is the difference between knowing what's just information and what's knowledge. Computers are fast, people are slow, but only people are smart. Only people can discern the differences in the information as to what's useful. One of the things we were talking about before we came down here was the uniqueness of the legal field in that you start off thinking linearly. You start off thinking A, B, C, D, looking at a set of facts, and then you jump to a new conclusion, which is not linear, which is something that's off here. It's that intuition that makes a great litigator look at a set of facts and rearrange them and represent them in a way that somebody didn't look at them in the prior set of circumstances. And I'm not sure that is something that computers can do. They can do that linear progression much faster than we can, and they can sort through all that information much faster than we can. But they can't do that intuition. Now, there's an enormous amount of pressure on us to call this, I think, intelligence because of the social pressure that we're under that Woody alluded to. The example I use in my book is the compression of time under which we've been working here. Calculus was invented in 1650, 1660, something like that. In the 1700s, you start seeing people like Faraday experimenting with electricity. In the 1800s, the steam engine, the locomotive, started the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. In the 1900s, you start looking at the telephone, the telegraph. Then later in the century, the jet engine, the television, the introduction of the computer after World War II. And then in the 60s, the beginning of the computer age, and all of a sudden by 1982, the introduction of the PC. You can see the time frame is shrinking. These developments are happening exponentially, and people are being bombarded now with the internet that's exploded in 2 years, 3 years, the last couple of years, and seems to grow enormously every week. People are being bombarded with all of this information, and I think there is a sense that we sometimes say, well, if we can process all of this information, that's intelligence. And I think the important thing to remember is the human factor, the ability to use that intuition. To the phrase I hate to use it because we hear it too much, but thinking outside the box. Don't look at things inside the frame, but where do things? What's that television commercial where the kids drawing outside the lines? That's what's uniquely human, and I think even more so in the legal profession, what makes successful attorneys is the ones who can think outside the box and can look at those facts and use them in a different way. An example I like to use is I was involved in a case a number of years ago. Some of you may remember there was a huge series of fires in Oakland, California. I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, perhaps even longer. But fires devastated the whole city up and down the side of the hill that looks down onto the bay. Of course, there were a number of insurance cases that came up after that. I was involved with one that involved a car dealership that had been destroyed that was owned by Reggie Jackson, the ball player, who played for the Oakland A's at the time. And it turned out that Reggie's also a big car collector. He collects classic cars and had a number of cars stored at the dealership, and some of them were owned by the dealership and some of them were his. So there was an insurance coverage issue. And at one point during his deposition, Reggie was being asked about a motorhome. And they were talking about this motor vehicle that he had, and it was a motor home. And so they talked about the motor home several times, and they were using one of these pieces of software that does this sort of artificial intelligence that will search through all these things. And I helped set up the database on that. Well, I got a call a couple of months later, and the attorney was saying the program wasn't working. They were searching for something that Reggie had said about this one particular motorhome. The attorney said, I know that we talked about this because I remember I made an objection. There was an extended discussion about this objection off the record. And then we went back on the record and we went on and so forth. And so I went back into the program. I said, well, let's search for objection. Let's look at the objections within a time frame here and find your objections, and we'll kind of come at it from a different angle. And in fact, what had happened is that on that particular day, at some point, somebody referred to the motorhome as a camper. And everybody else in the room picked up on it, all the other attorneys and Reggie, and they started talking about a camper. And when the objection came up, it wasn't an objection to something about this motorhome. It was an objection to something about a camper. And I think that's the sort of thing, that's the sort of thinking outside the box, that's the sort of intuitiveness that needs to go into this whole process, that takes us from information and masses of information that we're inundated with to knowledge, which is quintessentially human. And I'm not sure that computers will ever approach that. I think it's always important to remember that computers are just a tool. They're a very fast tool, but a pencil is a tool, a book is a tool, a computer is a tool, and the person is what's controlling how that tool is being used. To me, that's the thing that has to be gotten across to students more than anything else. Thanks. Any questions?
Anybody? Comments? Questions? Okay.